Hey guys, this is Kirob speaking, and in today's little dev update we are going to have a little bit of a different menu. Because yes, I'm going to tell you what is the latest news about the current ongoing work on the patch, and it's going well. I've just completed the final implementation of the naturally aspirated calculations for the new engine calculations, and that has already been put into the game, and now it is down to polishing that up, adding a few more dependencies and hook it up to the sliders and all kinds of new things, and that's going well. So that is still on course. And then what I'm going to tell you next, that was already all, because I'm in a different version of the game. I'm on your version of the game. Because why I'm really here and talking to you is because of two things. That is the photo competition. No, it's not photo competition, although it's kind of a photo competition. The face of the update competition. But Kara, what is that? Well, that is the competition where you design a car. It is the 1990 to 2010 Roadster Revival Challenge. You design a car and make it real pretty, and that car will become the face of the update and be replacing the hero image on Steam. So your car has a chance to be on the front page of everything. That is automation. That car that you submit will be judged in overall appearance, like how appealing is the design, is it error appropriate, does it have the right wow factor to it, and then design consistency, also an important thing. Is it consistent between front and back, or if not, does it all fit together? And then attention to detail. How nicely worked out are the details? Does it only look good from 5 miles away, or can you go pretty close and it still holds up? And then creativity. How unique is your take on that design? I think those are pretty good scoring categories for a design that will be on the front page of automation. And the deadline is still some ways out. I thought I'd give you a heads up a little earlier than usual. So 16th of August, that is 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. And I really hope lots of you are going to enter this one, because we need a beautiful car on the front cover. Because this is a beautiful update, of course. Oh yes, and for this competition you not only submit your car, but also a picture of the car. And there we come to the photo workshop, where I'm going to host a little workshop on our Discord with a live stage kind of thing, where I'm streaming the game and I'm taking your photos and talk about them, what is good about them, what is bad about them, how they can be improved, and so on. And also give general tips on how to make better photos of your car. That will be on 9 p.m. tomorrow CET, so Saturday 9 p.m. Central European Time. And the video of it will also be available on YouTube and uploaded there after the fact. But that will not allow you to directly interact with the stream that will be ongoing, and I will be answering questions there as well about, in general, the photo taking and the competition, and how to do better at photos. We just recently had another competition which is slowly wrapping up, and that was the Camshaft software crossover play competition. And an interesting fact about this one was that I completely annihilated the field with my car. You ask, how did Kirob do that? Well, I sat down for 2 days and delved deep into trying to, within the rule set, of course, exploit the game as hard as possible to learn about these exploits and discover them all, so that they can be fixed for 4.3. Why is that important, and why is it 4.3? Well, that is where multiplayer is going to make an appearance. So, I thought that maybe it is worth investing some time into getting that right. And today we are not only going to take a look at my beautiful entry that crushed the opposition dead, but also talk about all those exploits, why they are there, and how we can fix them. Alright, I've just cloned it, and now we can safely make adjustments to it as we see fit to show the effects of various exploits. Alright, let me present to you the Baroudeur EX500, where EX stands for exploit. 500 of them. 500, that's the car, by the way. Alright, so here we have it sitting, and this is a car that is slightly outside of what the challenge was asking for. It was asking for a kind of Grand Touring / premium car, certainly not one with 1,600 horsepower. Let's have a quick look at the limitations or rather the rules for the car, and why I managed to squeeze so much out of those limitations. Let's have a quick look here. So, let's talk about the engine first. We have the following limitations. We go here. Yes, no, that's right. We have the following limitations. No race parts. The engine is supposed to be year 2020. That's good. And no race parts. So what would there be? So this is all good. Race parts. Anything that says race is forbidden. So there's nothing here. There's nothing there. Here, turbo race headers would be forbidden. And of course race intakes would also be forbidden. We are running on 98, and we just need at least a muffler and a maximum noise value of 50. Okay, easy. Engineering time needs to be below 220, very easy. And turbocharged engines need to have an intercooler, otherwise because there's a bug in there. Like, you get more power out of it if you don't use an intercooler. So yes, intercooler present. So why does this engine come out so damn cheap and make so much power? Well, it's quite simple, really. So that is the goal. You don't really care all too much about weight, because in this challenge, weight gave you extra tire width. So you can get away with an engine that is a little heavier than usual. And let's unlock this, but not change anything. So we have a V12 in here, but V12s are really expensive. Well, not so much if you make them direct acting overhead cam, are they? Alright, so 8.3 liters also helps with making power. And Alzi is not all that super expensive. So that works out nicely. 8.3 liters, you don't need to make all that much boost in order to get to 1,600 horsepower. Not just standard components, really. You really need a harmonic damper. And then some heavy-duty forge, because we don't need to rev high. This is not a racing engine, this is just a very powerful engine. Just barely revving to 7,300. Full reliability as well, as we see here, 73.5, that's not bad. And cam profile, a very modest 56, because turbos don't like big cams. Or I should rather say, to be a little bit more accurate, they don't like big overlap, which comes with big cams in automation. So then we have the turbo setup. Let's take a quick look. I'm running 2 bar of boosts. That's a lot, but the power needs to come from somewhere. Set it up decently well here, so there's no resurge damage or anything. It's crossing a good portion of the compressor map. It's going a little too far into the inefficient area over there, but I can live with that. I'm reusing twin scroll, so nothing too fancy, 2 turbos, and smart boost. So where are the exploits here? So far, there are not really any. It's just being a little smart about the limitations. You want to keep costs down, because those costs are going to be affecting the car's total costs. The car's total costs are limited to 100,000 buckaroos, automation buckaroos. So you want to keep the engine cheap, and you don't actually want to use all the engineering time, because the engineering time will cost you automation buckaroos. And that is bad. If you don't need them, don't spend them. So here's something that some people missed. Ah, you want to have more power. Let's go for performance. All right, take a look at what happens with your loudness when you do. 50. You're beyond what you're allowed. By just doing this switch. How much are we losing there? Let's see, is this even better? Well, we're gaining 3 kilowatts. I think it's worth the alternative there, to lose 3 kilowatts for having no problems with your loudness. So this is working really nice. Also, quite important, in this challenge, comfort is valuable, and a low loudness rating is important for comfort. So this all makes sense. And I don't need a high flow here, that's just wasted money. Look at that. It doesn't even help you that much, because you're running big... well, okay, not that big exhaust. In this current version of automation, and that will change with the next update, with the bigger engine calculation revamp that is coming, exhaust size being too small doesn't matter too much, as long as you don't go completely overboard. So that will change, but currently it's not that important, and this is perfectly fine. 1,200 horsepower there. Or is this... yeah, that should be in horsepower. And just a very standard setup for a comfort car. Because the power is there anyway, and it's a lazy engine. So why not just slap on something that makes the car quiet? So that's all already. There's no exploits really here. The only thing that I did that was a little outside of the norm was that I went for a standard intake in order to reduce loudness a lot. But that's fair. Performance intake is supposed to be quite a lot more noisy, especially if you have a big engine like this. And then the only other thing was being a little tricky about the choice of direct acting overhead cam. But that is something that we should talk about. Why is direct acting overhead cam viable here? Why don't you have to go for dual overhead cam or so? Well, because you're running a turbocharger. A turbocharger means that you fix most of the problems of direct acting overhead cam, because it's just more difficult to get the stuff into the cylinder with direct acting overhead cam. It's not super efficient. But with a turbocharger there to help it out, yeah, those problems are gone. So yeah, you can use this system. It's not going to beat efficiency benchmarks, that's for certain, but it's going to do the job. And it's dirt cheap while doing so. So that has produced an engine that is very adequately powerful for a comfort car that was supposed to be aiming for 400-500 horsepower. Really, from the theme of it, that would have been a very powerful kind of GT car-ish, and for long distance travel, still suitable, comfortable, and all that. And reliable, but this is all that, but with 4 times the power. For this challenge, I actually had to sit down and design a car. I know, it's not massively pretty, but it is okay. And for the first time ever, and I actually mean this, for the first time ever, I have used 3D fixtures for the inside of the car. Don't judge me. I should have just submitted a bare red car, as I always do for my playthroughs. That would have been funny as well. Wouldn't have scored nearly as highly though, but everyone would have known who that car is from. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about the design choices here and how those are exploity. First of all, I'm going for a heavy car. Heavy because in this challenge specifically, we had the rule of the car's weight adding allowed tire size. So I chose a weight where the next size is available and kind of the highest size is available, and that is 285. And then targeted that weight and basically didn't pay too much attention with being lightweight or anything. It's not required, because what we can see here, that I'm not going for glued aluminium or light AHS steel, but just the standard stuff. The only thing that is a little bit out of the norm is fiberglass, and that is because I want to keep engineering time down, because that is a big cost factor. And I do need that engineering time for something else. But we do need double wishbone though, and the engine placement is front longitudinal for a very heavy car and a pretty heavy engine. That doesn't really matter too much. We will still be able to get a decent, heavy interior especially. We will get a decent weight balance. Well, that's why I chose those. But now let's talk about the car body choice. That is an important one. The rules said it needed to be longer than 2.7 meters in wheelbase and shorter than 3.2. Okay, well, to stay agile and be lightweight, you want to go for the lowest of them. Right, but I want to have a pretty heavy car. Doesn't really matter, does it? Okay, well, because I can make it as heavy as I like anyway. Why am I choosing this one if the challenge is in 2020? Well, if you go along here and check, like the... where do we have it? There. If you check these modern ones, these are a little too small. This one would be fine. But the larger ones have one distinct disadvantage. And that is that they are of higher track width. Like, look at this one, for instance. Perfectly suitable car, right? Look at the track width. That's 1 meter 54. This challenge has a top speed test as well. Pretty big rating and some very fast tracks. So if they all are in the same category, like sedans, they will have the same CV value or CV value that is dependent on their length. Or rather their aspect ratio. And if the CV value is the same, how do you reduce drag? Well, you reduce it by limiting the size of your frontal area. So you want to find a car body that has a lower frontal area. Really, that's it. So there was an example up there which also could have been taken, but I went for something that is rather slender, and that was the car of my choice, if I find it again. There it is. So this one has a track width of just 1 meter 30, and that compares to the 154 which we had for the larger cars that were available in the challenge, and there were some even wider ones. And of course that's not an exploit at all. That's just a decent decision that makes the car fit right into the rules and use them to its advantage. But now let's talk about some of the exploits here. Well, all-wheel drive, not an exploit. I just chose it because that makes the car heavier, and we have so much power which needs to get to the road, so kind of limited to longitudinal all-wheel drive here. Gearbox. For the longest time, I was actually using the advanced automatic here. And you might wonder, why the hell would you do that? It's very simple, and that's the grand concept that we are going to explore here now, which is the main... Look at this power delivery, by the way. Basically completely flat over the whole rev range. Yeah, the main issue that we are seeing here is the ratio between drivability and sportiness mattering. How can a car with 1,600 horsepower have a sportiness rating that is real fast, by the way, on the track and stuff, as you have seen from my results? That's the fastest car. How can that be so not sporty? That is the main exploit that we're going to take a look at. But first, let me give you a little taste of what I mean with this car is fast. So it is optimized. It is a car that is how heavy? 2,163 right here. Well, we've changed around some things. Oh, right, this is an auto manual. Yeah. All right. So now, this is correct. 2,175 was my target for the weight, because that is exactly the switchover point for the next tire size. But this car is proper fast. Yeah, it has cornering radius cornering Gs of 1.24 and 1.22, and that is without much downforce. Not much downforce at all. It's basically neutral downforce. So lots of mechanical grip there. And it is doing the automation test track in... that's the 154. That's pretty good for a GT car. It's more like race car. And then if we go to the Delure Salt Flats, let's see how it accelerates real quick. Here you go. It just keeps going. Alright, we are reaching the end, and it has reached 518. Is that the highest bid? Yes. So, this car is actually 518 kilometers, not the 503. Yeah, it's pretty solid. So the gearbox is set up to accommodate for the slightly fastest top speed than what is given by the game. But what makes this car so fast around the track? There is a concept on the track that is called track roughness. So you have bad surfaces, like this portion here, from here to, especially through here, so on in some of the corners here, they are pretty rough and slightly damaged, and that makes cars which are having a high sportiness value and a low drivability value lose a little bit of cornering G's, because yeah, they are harder to drive there, they are harder to catch and so on. They're not quite as drivable. But that concept can be dragged through the dirt, and it comes out completely in the opposite way of how it was intended originally. Because that sounds reasonable, right? A car that has high drivability and lower sportiness should be pretty easy to handle. Well, not necessarily. It depends on where that sportiness and drivability comes from, and not necessarily in racing conditions. So it comes down to you losing time if you have a high sportiness value. So then, high sportiness to drivability value. Let's see, the ratio is what is important here. So our goal with our design to exploit that fact is to make the car artificially drivable and artificially not sporty. And that is also why I for the longest time had an advanced automatic in the car, because that completely kills the sportiness. Unfortunately also it negatively impacts the time it takes to shift, which was a higher loss than the gain from nuking my sportiness value and having an even higher drivability. So let's take a look at some of those choices. Some of you might have seen some things already. We do need the best possible tires for the job, because we need the mechanical grip. The smart way of going about that is that you go pretty much the same value for front and rear size, make it as close to oversteer as possible, and then make it come back just in the terminal, so that you get terminal understeer instead of oversteer. That is giving you the best results for the cornering. That has always been the case, and it is quite realistic. It's basically a neutral kind of steering, and then you want to have terminal understeer instead of terminal oversteer. That makes going towards the limits quite a bit less dangerous than having terminal oversteer. And that is also reflected then in the drivability rating and, well, sportiness rating too. And if we take a look here, you need to make sure that the same thing happens for the fast steering. And also you need to make sure that it's not only true for this situation that is being shown, which is the 200 meters corner radius, but rather for all these situations. So if you see the curve just swap here towards terminal understeer, that is usually not enough to make that happen at all speeds, at all corner radii. So usually, and you can see that in your track time performance, you want to have a few clicks extra of more rear camber. In general, you want to use low profile tires, and the tires are a major cost factor for this, because, well, if you're getting up to those speeds, they are not cheap. But who really cares, right? It's we're well within budget. Let's take a look. Well, yeah, there's a lot of margin here. I mean, $100, that's perfect. But now, how do you change this ratio even more? Well, here's a gigantic exploit. Well, what you want to do is that you have brake fade like crazy, but only for sportiness. only when driving the car in a sporty way. And, well, that is a massive exploit, because this just nukes your sportiness value by 50%, while not affecting your drivability. And that, yeah. Don't tell me this isn't realistic, I know. That's the exploit, and this is broken, and this needs to be fixed. So, basically I was able to completely change this ratio by making the car terrible at driving in a sporty way, because it would just end up with brake fade instantaneously. And of course, I still want to have the brake power, so that the actual performance is there, but the, brake fade? Yes, all 50% of it. This also allows us to make a reasonably comfortable setup, because we don't need the pad type to get rid of the brake fade. And the car is rather nice and comfortable to drive. 57 comfort. I mean, it's not top of its class, but it's certainly up there. With all that money saved by just being very frugal in our decisions, like here, just luxury interior, don't need that handmade stuff, and luxury HUD, could have gone a little cheaper there by just going back to infotainment. How much difference does that make? Well, just 1,300, that's not too impressive, right? So, switching back there, that's all good. But, so we have the weight that we need, and everything else is set up. I'm going to come to the suspension tuning very soon. And this one too. But, aerodynamics next. What do you want? Well, this car really doesn't need much. Doesn't need much downforce, and you weren't allowed to have ridiculous downforce values either. So I opted for a pretty neutral approach. I have enough power to have not entirely just lift, which also is quite dangerous, because you can't reach those high-speed values if you have too much lift, because your car becomes too light, and the tires don't have enough friction with the road to put the power down. That's something that sometimes limits your top speed, and that is calculated correctly, so something to think about. But what I'm aiming for here is good cornering speed, of course. So just make it neutral, make it really slippery, so high top speed, but use decently low wing angles, especially in the rear, to make it go round and not oversteer, but also not super draggy. Interior, there's not much more to talk about, but now this one. This is another one of those exploits that goes onto the drivability versus sportiness ratios, and that is electric power steering. No, this is not a misclick. Look what happens when you go for the proper electric power steering. You almost double your sportiness value. Nah, not quite, but you only gain, as a fraction of this, you only gain a small percentage, like 10%. In drivability, while you gain like 70% in sportiness if you're at those low values. So that's a death blow to that beautiful ratio that we just had. So, and also electric power steering is dirt cheap. Isn't that a beautiful exploit? So you crash the sportiness rating of your car and it becomes faster on track. Yeah, this is bullshit. Exactly, this is bullshit that needs to be fixed. And of course I used the optimized weight slider to just get it right for the car weight overall. It was supposed to get just beyond 2,175 for the optimal tire width there. And that worked out nicely. Staying as close to possible to the middle in order to not invest any engineering time. That was slightly limited there. Engineering time needs to be saved for one thing mainly, and that is aerodynamic quality. There is so much top speed driving, or relatively much compared to other challenges. There was quite a lot of top speed driving in here, so I wanted to have a very good CD value for the car. Because the car's safety rating was also evaluated, I went for the advanced 2020s. Of course, that's slightly expensive, but on the other hand, that will give me some points in the challenge, and did so remarkably well. And then, the suspension setup, and you can see what I did here already. Hydropneumatic, known as the most sporty of suspensions. And this is the most sporty of tunes as well. So no, of course, neither of that is true, and that is dripping with sarcasm. And yes, this is also bullshit. So, let's take a look. Hydropneumatic. Let's use the proper suspension. Yeah, that's destroying our sportiness to drivability ratio, but what is really unsporty and really quite drivable and very comfortable and prestigious and stuff? Well, hydropneumatic is. So that's beautiful. Perfect choice for this challenge then. And sway bars, don't really need anything fancy there. That's all good. This is too costly. And why this setup? Well, you can see it like this. Sportiness is completely being killed by this setup. We are looking for comfort as well as drivability, but mostly drivability. Problem is that if you're in the middle and have it set up somewhat reasonably, then you still have too much sportiness. This is the way to kill sportiness much harder than you kill drivability. So again, always the same exploit. It's all coming down to this ratio, and this is what needs to be fixed. So how do we fix it? Well, we already have the concept in game, which is a difference between track tameness, which is track drivability, and track sportiness, and the normal values that you are seeing here, which are sportiness and drivability. So the equivalent parts, but for the track. And those should be mixed in a completely different way. For instance, the springs, the choice of springs here, their drivability value should not count towards the drivability value on the track, but rather the sportiness value of these should be counted towards the drivability on the track. And of course vice versa. So that will fix a whole lot of issues. I do it the same way here. It just needs to be the exact opposite. Then we had the brake fade. That was another crushing penalty. And the brake fade probably should be on the track, be a kind of multiplier to your braking distance. Either in general, if you want a really simple implementation, or beyond the first few corners or something, with a slowly building up fade depending on how bad it is. But this value here does not at all affect how well braking works on the track, and it really should. So once this is implemented, which really needs to happen, then I think that issue would be fixed. And this doesn't even then have to come into the sportiness, track sportiness or track drivability, although it could. So maybe a combination of both, that the braking distance actually gets longer and the car becomes harder to drive on the track. I think the general setup here with the with how you properly set up your slow and fast steering, that is probably spot on, and that is an interesting compromise you need to make and need to find the right balance for the car and all that. This played really well. And here again, the gearbox should probably add its drivability value to the track sportiness and its sportiness value to the track drivability. Although every such design choice should be evaluated separately and really looked at. For instance, this one, you could argue that, okay, drivability for the manual is deemed lower, and in a race setting, that is definitely the case if you compare to dual clutch, because you can focus on other things and make less mistakes that way. So yeah, drivability, should that be added to the sportiness? Should the sportiness be added to the drivability there? I don't quite know. This one does seem to be a bit more akin to what actually should be happening, because you're already punished by shifting times, as we found out. This difference made my car 2 seconds slower around the automation test track. Going from advanced automatic to dual clutch was 2 seconds faster. On the suspension page, that would be a pretty easy thing to do, where you just add the sportiness factor to the track drivability and the drivability factor to the track sportiness. or maybe even the comfort factor to the track sportiness, which then would lower your, you wouldn't feel bumps anymore if you have cushions around your butt like this. But yeah, definitely something to investigate. But overall, I think we've found the major issues that are offsetting balance in a really bad and unintuitive way. And those should be reasonably easy to fix. And now that I've hard exploited the game for 2 days straight while building this car, I think I've found them all, which is great. Yeah, just have a quick look at my sportiness factors here. You can see the big culprits right there. Well, agility, yes, should crush it, because it's a whale of a car. Power steering and brake fade. And then we have the loudness, yes, we've talked about that on the engine side. Chassis stiffness, not that major of a thing, but suspension tuning and bottoming out is hurting it as well. The bottoming out is also hurting the drivability just as much, so the ratio remains kind of the same. And it does so because 10% of 52 is almost the same as 10% of 47. So very close. But alright, I think I have nicely illustrated here how unbelievably broken some of those mechanics are, and talked a little bit about how we can reasonably easily fix that and make a much more solid game that is compatible to being a multiplayer game. And that would be so much fun. Alright, I hope you enjoyed, and see you guys next time.